Hey everybody. Yeah. So here I am. Long story short, and literally long story short, I hurt my back. And I'm literally lying here um on the couch because it is essentially the best place for me to be right now. Um I'd probably prefer to be in my bed, but that's upstairs and I can't make it upstairs. Literally. So I'm kind of just stuck down here, and I'll be stuck here for a while. I don't think I've been in this kind of pain probably in years. And I've had some crazy stuff happen, but man, this is like a beast. So there was no way I was going to make it into class this morning. So what you see is what you get. I just kind of, this is going to be real basic. I have like props or images or something to reference by. That just isn't happening today. You're just going to get live and raw and uncut me. And this is going to get recorded. So I'll post the link to this so anybody and everybody can watch. Let me cut this volume off on my phone. So anybody who wants to watch it now, feel free. You can say something in the comments over on the right. If you got any questions, also, I'll like I said, I'll post this video link so everybody can watch it later. What we were going to talk about today was actually getting into several different things, and I don't have my notes in front of me, but I have a general idea of what we're going to get into. One of the things that we were going to talk about the difference. There are two images in your notes, and one of those images was talking about lipid soluble hormones, and the other one was talking about water soluble hormones. Now, remember what we said about a cell membrane. A cell membrane is this thing that wraps around a cell and it kind of holds everything inside the cell, like holds it together. But the cell membrane is a phospholipid bilayer, so it's a double layer of fat. Remember, I said it was a double layer of Crisco. So anything in the lipid family, anything cholesterol, oils, fats, all that stuff, they can pass right through a cell membrane with no problem. Easy peasy. All right. So that means that a lipid soluble hormone should be able to pass through the cell membrane. When you say lipid soluble, you say soluble, you mean it can dissolve in it. Like sugar is water soluble because I can put sugar in water and stir it and it dissolves in the water. Salt is water soluble because you can put salt in water and stir it and it'll dissolve in the water. Fat is not water soluble because if I go in there and I get some olive oil and pour it in some water and stir it up, you're going to see them same globules of oil sitting there floating in your bottle of water. So oil is not water soluble. So when I say that something is lipid soluble, that means that it can mix in the lipid. That's why if you want to make a foot scrub for somebody to give away as a gift, the easiest thing to do is just get some sugar, some olive oil, and like a few drops of your favorite scented oil, like essential oil, like lavender or spearmint or peppermint or something like that. Mix it up, give it to them as gift. You got an instant foot scrub. Why? Because you put sugar, you put sugar in oil, and sugar is water soluble. It's not lipid soluble, so the sugar won't dissolve in the oil. You'll sit there and you'll rub it between your fingers, and it won't break down. So going back to how a lipid soluble hormone and a protein and a water soluble hormone communicate with a cell. A lipid soluble hormone passes through the cell membrane and it connects to a receptor on the inside of that cell. Usually the receptors like on a mitochondrion or in the nucleus. Mitochondria creates ATP. The nucleus is where the genetic material is. Man, that's where the real deal is, because once it binds to the receptor in the nucleus, it usually stimulates that cell to now generate some information that's taken outside of the nucleus into the rest of the cell. and then the cell makes something. Now, this is great for us. I mean, literally, honestly, it's great. That's my dog. Sorry. Tierno, no bark. Please, no bark. I know it's the mailman. Let it go. Yes, I see it. And I'm live, dude. So the hormone can pass through the cell membrane and goes right into the cell. It binds to a receptor site in the nucleus. And that's why in the image, no bark, Tierno, EC. EC. Great. I'm stuck on the couch. I cannot get that door. So it's just gonna have to sit there. So that's why when you look in the image, it'll show the hormone literally go through the cell membrane and go inside of the cell, and then it'll attach to this receptor site and that's in the nucleus, and then you'll see RNA created, and you'll see the RNA leave the nucleus. Now, what that is the RNA that's being created is like a carbon copy of your DNA, which is then taken outside of the nucleus into other parts of the cell so that your cell can build something. So this could be anything from another hormone. One of you asked that on Monday. You asked, okay, who told that hormone to be released? Well, it could have been another hormone that came in there and tagged that cell and told that cell to make a second hormone. That could very well have occurred. Or it could be an enzyme that it's making. For example, I just had a sandwich before I took this extra strength Tylenol. So there are cells in my digestive tract that are going to make enzymes to help break down the food, and they had to be told to do that. And you have hormones that help with your digestive process. So that in turn could have happened. So if it's lipid soluble, always remember the hormone always goes inside the cell. Always. If there's anything you got to remember, please don't forget that. The hormone always passes through the cell membrane and goes inside the cell because the cell membrane is made out of a double layer of fat. And a lipid hormone or a lipid soluble hormone is made out of fat as well. And fat mix. Now, there's a more complicated image that's 2 slides after that one that shows the hormone never making it inside the cell. Instead, the hormone attaches to this weird, I can't remember if it's blue or purple receptor on the cell membrane, and it shows that the hormone never goes inside of the cell. And that's because the hormone is a protein hormone, and it's water soluble. And remember, water and fat don't mix. So if it can dissolve in water, it cannot dissolve in lipids. If it can dissolve in water, it can't dissolve in fat. That's why I told the whole story about the sugar scrub. Sugar doesn't dissolve in oil when you make a sugar scrub because sugar is water soluble, and you're talking about an oil. So the protein hormone, or that water soluble hormone, winds up staying outside of the cell. It attaches to a receptor site on the outside of the cell. And then there's a cascade of biochemical events that take place afterwards. You'll notice that directly attached to the receptor is something called a G protein in that image. That G protein is turned on. It's activated as soon as the hormone attaches to the receptor from the outside. So the hormone, the water soluble hormone, attaches to the receptor on the outside. It activates the G protein, which is right beside it. And then the G protein attracts ATP. And every ATP molecule it can find, it turns into something called C-amp. And then C-amp goes out and it begins to act like that hormone inside of that cell. So C-amp is now the inside man for the water soluble hormone. That protein hormone could not get inside the cell. So what it does is it simply converts somebody on the inside to act as its double agent in its stead. So I know that was one of the first things I wanted to talk about in class today. The next thing that I know I wanted to talk about in class were the relationship between hormones. Sometimes, and that's the slides that you see the comic book characters on, sometimes hormones have a synergistic relationship. In other words, they work together. They work in tandem with one another. In other words, you get a bigger bang for your buck when you have this hormone and this hormone work together. An example of that is epinephrine and norepinephrine. You'll see that definitely with epinephrine and norepinephrine. They talk about the fact that you don't get a full response. You don't get that full fight or flight response without epinephrine and norepinephrine both added together. Another example is T3 and T4. You'll notice in the textbook that they typically talk about thyroid hormone, but they don't always tell you that thyroid hormone is actually two chemicals put together. And that people who have thyroid problems, sometimes they are experiencing the fact that they have enough T3, but they don't have enough T4, or they have enough T4 and not enough T3. They have a synergistic relationship. When you have both, you get the best response, you get the best results. You only got one, not so good. Sometimes hormones have a permissive relationship. In other words, you need one to occur so that the other one will get permission to function. So like thyroid stimulating hormone, or better yet, stimulates thyroid hormone to be released. It's like a cascade effect. I'm gonna definitely have to draw this out for you. But thyroid releasing hormone comes from your hypothalamus. And then thyroid releasing hormone targets the pituitary gland, which is right below it. Then the pituitary gland then releases thyroid stimulating hormone, which targets your thyroid. And then your thyroid gland releases thyroid hormone. Now, one hormone had to be released in order to give permission for the next hormone to show up. That's why we call it permissive. The last one of the three that we were going to talk about was antagonistic. And I have an image in there, I think, of Black Panther fighting Killmonger. And that's to show how the American perspective on antagonists is an antagonist is always bad, which is kind of why I like watching anime, because in Japanese anime, the antagonist isn't always the bad guy. Sometimes this person is misunderstood. And after you see their backstory, you kind of like, I may not say that I would be the bad guy, but I understand. The bad guy is usually misunderstood. They're real people, kind of like Killmonger was in Black Panther. At first, it's like, oh, Killmonger's evil. He's bad. Da 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 da. You find out what happens to Killmonger, and you're kind of like, oh, dang, that's pretty dirty, dude. I kind of feel Killmonger was framed. So antagonists, when you talk about an antagonist hormone, it's not a bad thing. It just means that for this hormone doing this thing, you have another hormone doing that thing. An example of that is what we talked about on Monday with insulin. You remember how insulin lowers sugar levels? Well, glucagon raises sugar levels. Glucagon isn't evil. Neither is insulin. Neither one of them are bad. Both of them are good, and both of them are needed all the time. It's just one makes one thing go up, another makes the thing go down. In 210, you talked about two antagonists. You talked about parathyroid hormone, aka PTH, and you talked about calcitonin. Parathyroid hormone makes calcium levels in the blood go up. Calcitonin makes calcium levels go down. So those two are antagonistic against one another. There are several antagonistic hormones that we'll talk about this semester, and you'll see them. You'll on the first lecture test, you'll want to be able to give examples. Actually, on the first lecture test, you'll want to be able to say whether or not two hormones have a synergistic relationship and an antagonistic relationship or permissive relationship. And I'll give examples as we go along. So at this point, this is where in class I wanted to actually talk about individual hormones. And I think a picture is worth 1,000 words. And I'm looking at the time on the video, and I don't want to take this a whole nother half hour, but I am going to spend the second half of this video really talking about just individual hormones, where they come from, where they're going, and what they're doing. And I want to stick to the hormones that, number one, I know you really need to know from this chapter. And number two, are hormones that you're probably going to see on the test. So let's start with the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus, When I was in undergrad, we learned that the hypothalamus was we learned it different from how you guys learned it in 210. In 210, you learned that the hypothalamus was a part of the brain, and that the hypothalamus was actually part of the nervous system, and that he also creates hormones. When I was in school, we learned that the hypothalamus was like this structure that was by itself, and that's how a lot of people in my generation, in my age group, were taught. So you'll find that some people still believe that the hypothalamus is like this separate thing, but it's actually integrated, hardwired into your brain. It's a part of your brain. It just happens to make hormones as well. So it lives in two different organ systems, both the nervous system and the endocrine system. And the hypothalamus primarily creates two types of hormones: releasing hormones and inhibiting hormones. Inhibiting hormones are exactly what it sounds like. It inhibits. If it releases an inhibiting hormone, the job of that hormone is to shut something down. Um, if it's a releasing hormone, then the job is to get something to be released. That's it. There's no extra thing to learn about it. That's just how it works. I mean, if it's got inhibiting in its name, it's shutting something down. If it's got releasing in its name, then it's getting something to be released. A perfect example is like something I said earlier in the video, which is thyroid releasing hormone. Thyroid releasing hormone is getting my pituitary gland to release a hormone called thyroid stimulating hormone. GnRH was a hormone I mentioned in lab on Monday. GnRH is gonadotropin releasing hormone. And gonadotropin releasing hormone stimulates my pituitary gland to release gonadotropins. And there's two gonadotropins. There's FSH and LH. And those two gonadotropins target the gonads, whether it be male or female. So those are two releasing hormones that you're going to see pop up consistently, constantly. We'll talk about those often. When you finish talking about the hypothalamus, you come to find out that the hypothalamus does not directly tell anybody to do anything. The hypothalamus really enjoys using releasing hormones and inhibiting hormones to tell other organs and other tissues to do its job, to do its work. And that's just how the hypothalamus works, because the hypothalamus does so many other different things. I can think of right now off the top of my head 8 essential jobs of the hypothalamus, like 8 things that if the hypothalamus stopped doing it in a human being, their life would practically be quite difficult. And this is one of them, is functioning by releasing these hormones to talk to other organs and tissues and cells. The pineal gland produces melatonin. And we kind of talked about melatonin before. You know, when melatonin is at high levels, you get sleepy. So melatonin is great. When it peaks, you're usually getting ready to go to bed. Like, unfortunately, my brain is trained to release copious amounts of melatonin between 9:30 and 10 o'clock at night. I hate that. I hate that my brain is trained that way. I get sleepy between 9:30 and 10. However, if I can make it to 10:30, I can stay awake all night long. So if I'm driving at night, people are like, "Oh, are you going to be okay?" Yeah, just give me 2 cups of coffee. Let me get through that 9:30 to 10 o'clock time period. Because once 10:30 hits, I'm lit. I'm good to go. It was like that when I was single and I was going to parties and going to the club. I would take a nap. You can, if one of my friends were here, they tell you now, I was notorious. I would take a nap at about 9:30, 10 o'clock. People who didn't know me would be like, "Why is Julian taking a nap?" My closest friends would be smiling and say, "Oh, you'll see. All he needs is a nap. He'll be up all night. No problem." And I'm still that way today. But 9:30 to 10 o'clock, melatonin is at an all-time high. Lights out, about to go to bed. So you go through ebbs and flows. When melatonin drops, that's usually when you wake up. You become more conscious. So that's why when the sun begins to rise, why people are more likely to wake up. If you have difficulty waking up in the morning, try sleeping with the blinds cracked so that sunlight can come in. Try sleeping with your face facing the window as the sun comes up. As more light enters the room, your melatonin levels will naturally begin to drop. You can train your brain to actually function that way. The pituitary gland is made up of two lobes. There's the anterior lobe and the posterior lobe. The anterior lobe creates several hormones. The posterior lobe only produces two. Now, I just said that, but let me clean that up a little bit. The posterior lobe doesn't really create hormones. The posterior lobe actually stores these hormones. Now, I know what you're thinking. Wait a minute. If the posterior lobe isn't creating hormones and he's only storing them, then where are these two hormones coming from? I'm glad you asked. The two hormones that the posterior lobe is storing actually came from, guess where? The hypothalamus. Yeah. So the hypothalamus, it made these hormones, but it sent them to the posterior lobe where they're going to be stored and they're going to reside, and where you can pull them out and use them anytime you want. Those two hormones are known as ADH, which is anti-diuretic hormone, and oxytocin. ADH, anti-diuretic hormone. If you think about the name, anti means against, diuretic means to, create urine. So anti is against making urine. So what it does is to reduce the amount of urine that you're making. ADH causes your body to retain water instead of throw it away, because you use water to create urine. So ADH tells your kidneys, don't throw that water away, hold on to that water. One of the times that you would expect ADH to be released, of course, is when you're dehydrated or you have low water levels. So a time that you would have low water levels but be completely healthy is when you're asleep. Unless you're a fish, you're not drinking water when you're asleep. So that's, how many hours you sleep, 4, 6, 8, whatever it is. That's hours of time that you're not taking water in, but your body's losing water. So your body may naturally release ADH to retain that water until you can wake up and start drinking water. Oxytocin, it means different things in different people. So in men, oxytocin actually targets our prostate gland, and it stimulates the prostate gland to release secretions. In a female, oxytocin targets the uterus and helps with childbirth. Oxytocin also targets the mammary glands, and it causes milk to be released from the mammary glands. So oxytocin has different purposes in different genders. That's all that comes from the posterior lobe. In the anterior lobe, you have the gonadotropins, which are FSH and LH. FSH and LH, they're usually waiting on gonadotropin releasing hormone to come from the hypothalamus to tell them to be released so that they can go do their jobs. Depending on whether it's male or female, will determine what job it is that FSH and LH are actually doing. For example, in men, FSH is actually stimulating sperm production. In men, LH is stimulating testosterone production. In women, FSH is around in a totally different way. FSH is stimulating follicle development as a woman is approaching ovulation. LH stimulates a woman to actually ovulate. So FSH and LH have two totally different jobs in men and in women. So those are two hormones from the anterior pituitary. Another hormone from the anterior pituitary is growth hormone. Growth hormone does exactly what you think it does. It makes you grow. It causes cellular growth. And so in order to cause cellular and tissue growth, it's got to stimulate a number of different things to occur, because growth is not free. That'll preach. Growth is not free. So it's going to mobilize metabolic resources. It's going to mobilize glucose, amino acids, fatty acids. It stimulates your cells to become more active. It helps you repair tissues, and it helps you grow. If you're an adolescent, you're going to grow at an exponential rate. If you're an adult, not so much. I'm really hoping that the tissue in my back heals at an exponential rate, because this whole laying out thing right now is for the birds. I really do believe that the reason why I'm laying here so calm and happy-go-lucky is because the medicine has kicked in. But I promise you, I've got this little bottle sitting right beside me. I'm going to probably tap back into this thing as soon as this video is over, because I can kind of slowly feeling it creep up. So you have growth hormone. You have melanocyte stimulating hormone. Melanocyte stimulating hormone is just what it sounds like. It stimulates melanocytes in your skin to produce melanin. Now, of course, that's a genetic thing too. So, depending on what your genetic disposition is, that's going to determine a lot about what your skin color is going to be. So I have, I have friends who have mixed race marriages. And so when you see their children, who are absolutely beautiful, you see their children, you see their skin tone. Their skin tone is like a combination of their mom and their dad, which makes sense. So sometimes they're like, oh, why didn't I turn out darker? Why didn't I turn out lighter? And the first thing I do is do like that. I'm like, look at your mama and your daddy. Your mom either has very little melanin and your dad has a lot, or vice versa. And there's genetics with that. And that's going to determine how much melanin your melanocytes actually produce. But the hormone that stimulates them to release melanin is melanocyte stimulating hormone. If you've ever been pregnant, or you got a friend that's pregnant, you'll notice that women who are pregnant have that pregnancy glow, that they call it. That glow, that tan that they get, is from melanocyte stimulating hormone being released during pregnancy, and it stimulates the melanocytes that produce melanin. So you'll see some women who have a difficult time getting a tan when they're pregnant. They get a really nice tan, and that happens from time to time. Who else am I forgetting? Thyroid stimulating hormone. Thyroid stimulating hormone is released from the anterior pituitary lobe, and it stimulates the thyroid to release thyroid hormone. That's pretty much all that it does. And then there's a long name, ACTH, adrenocorticotropic hormone. Adrenocorticotropic hormone, adreno means adrenal gland, cortico means the cortex. ACTH is targeting the cortex, the outer portion of the adrenal gland, and it stimulates the outer portion of the adrenal gland to release a number of different hormones that are there. I feel like I'm leaving one more dude out, somebody who doesn't get a lot of. So if it pops up in my head in just a moment, I'll let you know. Prolactin. I just thought about it. Prolactin. Prolactin is another hormone that's released from the anterior pituitary. Prolactin, pro meaning for, lactin meaning to lactate, to produce milk. So prolactin, it stimulates milk production in the mammary glands. Okay, so we're getting close to my cutoff time. So let me get to a couple more things, and then I'll try to create another video. I might create that next video tonight, or I may create the next video tomorrow. It kind of depends. Actually, no, I will create that second video today. I'll just get some more meds and get a little better here. The thyroid gland, what you need to go back and look at the thyroid gland with is it can get kind of complex. In lab, we talked about what a thyroid follicle looks like, all right? In lecture, they show images of a thyroid follicle. They show those purple cells are the guys, and I think the image in the textbook, they use like pink or something like that. But those follicular cells, those are the ones who are actually making thyroid hormone. But there are key ingredients that are required to make a thyroid hormone. One of those key ingredients is iodine. So it needs iodine. And the place that it gets iodine is from your diet. So it comes from what we eat. We pretty much have a lot of food here in the US that's fortified. So we've added this iodinized salt, um, iodized salt. We add it to stuff. We got more than enough salt in our food, so we rarely have a problem with a lack of iodine. In some places, they do deal with low iodine levels, and the reason for it is oftentimes that it's not in the soil. Um, if you live like in northern mountainous regions around the world, some of those places have low to no iodine, and so individuals wind up developing developmental issues like cretinism, where it's where you don't have iodine, so therefore you don't create viable thyroid hormone, and then because of that lack of thyroid hormone, the brain does not develop the way that it should. Another thing that you'll notice that it uses iodine, and it uses a specific type of amino acid, and they fuse the two of those together, and they store it in the follicle, and they pull it out of the follicle to use. And the primary thing you want to remember about thyroid hormone is that it manipulates metabolism in the body. Now, metabolism is kind of like a trick word, because we use metabolism for everything. And the reason why is because metabolism is a sum total of all the chemical processes that can happen in a cell. So you're talking about everything. You're talking about catabolism and anabolism. You're talking about anytime a cell wants to make something and anytime a cell wants to break something down. That is metabolism. So thyroid hormone can actually increase metabolic rates, or it can, it definitely affects metabolic rates in all of your cells. So you will see thyroid hormone released at times when you eat. You'll see thyroid hormone released when your body is very cold and it's trying to increase warmth. It's trying to create heat because using energy in a cell, a byproduct of that is heat. And so oftentimes that's what it'll do. It will just burn through energy just so it can release heat and use that heat. Other than the thyroid hormone, then you get to things like the adrenal gland, which I will cover the adrenal gland in the next video. And then the gonads, I'll cover those in the next video as well. So let's bring this to a stop here, because that's a lot of material. What I would highly suggest that you do is, like I said, later today, I'm going to post this link on our Blackboard page, so any of you can watch it. I know it's not exciting because you're just kind of watching me laid out on this couch, and trust me, I'm not sitting here chilling, having fun. I'm literally laid out in pain right now. But I'll post the link to this video. If you have questions, please send me all your questions, and I'll do my best to answer everything that you got and point you in the right direction. All right, folks, I'll have another video coming up later on this afternoon. Have a good one.